Hey y'all, it is Becky here from the Beckisphere. I feel like y'all can hear my roommate running the bath quite a bit, so I'm wondering if maybe I should go ahead and and the lighting's not great, figuring this whole thing out. And my mama's not here, but she's going to be here on video or the discussion section. Okay, let me go ahead and get more organized here. One sec, because I am extremely unorganized. Fun fact, though, is I was coming up. I live on the third floor of an apartment, and I was coming up, and I dropped a little Tupperware thing, and it fell through the cracks all the way down to, like, I don't even know. It could be in the bush. I literally have no idea. So that's great. We love to see that. But yeah. Welcome to my room. I was going to get the light, but I honestly don't even know where the little tripod is. So, we're thriving today. But hello, my name is Becky. If you're new here, hi, I'm Becky, and this is the Beckisphere, where we talk about everything relating to the climate, the problems, and the solutions. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in, go ahead and click that subscribe button below, hit the like, and comment, share, and in this case, join the discussion group if you're here live, and we are going to continue talking about Climate Courage by Andreas Karelas. I feel like I need to increase the height, and you can see my messy ass bed. Sorry. Does that look good? Should I keep it down here? If the one person that's watching right now is my mom, she's probably like rolling her eyes right now, being like, why is she doing all these things? Just start. I should, but I really want my lighting to be better and stuff. And so it's like struggle bus, major struggle bus. See, this is what I usually have. Mom says, hi, Becky, it doesn't matter. Okay, yeah, thanks, Mom. That's all I need to hear. Okay, let's go ahead and start. So we have been reading for this section, chapters 7 and 8. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Chapter 7 is called Energy Independence. And yeah. This is it. Exciting. And let me go ahead and read the quote, which is in the beginning of each of the chapters, because I like the quotes. So, we cannot drill and burn our way out of our present economic and energy problems. We can, however, invent and invest our way out. By Van Jones. I don't know who that is. I didn't look it up. I probably should have. But I like his quote. So yes, so chapter 7 talks about energy independence, and one of the ways in which we can become energy and the many different ways that we can become energy independent. And before we talk about what we can do personally to become energy independent is we can, okay, sorry, I need to take a deep breath. I'm like struggling in the beginning. Okay. Hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Okay, now we can go. All right, so the first section we're going to talk about is the Department of Defense, or the DoD. And what's interesting is, while it seems like many different political spheres seem to still struggle with the fact that climate change is happening and we need to move on it, the DoD has actually been moving on it. And so which is good, because as we will see, they account for 80% of the energy consumed by the U.S. government. So it is important that they are moving on it, because they represent a lot. It's the single largest consumer of energy in the world, the U.S. Department of Defense is. So yeah, that they really need to move on it. And yet at the same time, it's beneficial for them to move on it, not just from like a moral standpoint for climate change, but because the price ain't right anymore. Even the slightest price fluctuation or lack of supply could result in a big failure of the DoD system, because it will impact their funding greatly. So that's one of the points that he brings up. By the way, I'm on chapter 109. And another reason why it matters for the DoD to move on going towards 100% like renewable energy and dealing with climate change is that access to energy is one of the greatest security threats that soldiers abroad face, which I found interesting because I didn't even really think about that. But yeah, I'm just going to read you some of the parts that I found interesting in this section. In the early years of our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, a single Marine combat brigade burned through 500,000 gallons of diesel fuel every day. That's a lot. The vast majority of supply trucks in a convoy were needed to carry fuel. A 2009 report estimated that 1 out of every 24 fuel supply convoys resulted in a casualty because of the risks associated with transporting fuel. Between 2003 and 2007, so 4 years, over 3,000 American soldiers or contractors were killed in Iraq and Afghanistan while transporting fuel. So, wow, that is a huge loss of human life for fossil fuels. Fossil fuels kill in many ways, and that's just one way that I didn't even think about. But the Marines decided to do something about it by using mobile solar photovoltaics, which basically, instead of having to move fossil fuel, yeah, such a hidden cost, right, Mom? Seriously. Instead of using fossil fuel to power things, they instead started using solar panels. And another benefit of using solar panels is that it's quiet. And so instead of making a lot of noise trying to produce electricity in order to do all the things that the Marines needed to do, instead they were able to do all of that in quiet without being detected as easily. So that's another really cool aspect of solar, which is kind of another hidden benefit in this way, because I wouldn't have thought of that. It's like an unforeseen benefit. So, so the DoD represents 300,000 buildings located in 500 fixed military installations. And each branch of the armed services has a set of goals for quickly switching to renewable energy. So the Army and the Air Force, they both have the goal of becoming 25% renewable by 2025. So in less than 5 years. While the Navy is shooting for 50% by 2020. I don't know if they've done that. I have no idea. That would be interesting to explore if they have actually followed through with that promise, because that's like one of those rare cases where the goal has actually already passed. So it would be interesting to see whether or not they actually follow through with it. And I'm kind of surprised they didn't say here whether or not they followed through with it. I mean, I guess 2020 wasn't over, but still, I don't know. And yeah, another reason why it's important to switch to renewable energy for the DoD is because shipping of oil they spend a lot of time making sure that is a secure process. I mean, think about it. If we were to get rid of fossil fuels, then we wouldn't have to deal with like oil being spilled in the ocean too. Like that's another environmental problem that I feel like sometimes doesn't get put together with climate change, but it really is like just another example of the fossil fuel products hurting the environment. So so shipping oil is another huge like time consuming effort that the military does, and the impacts of climate change have already been felt in the nation's defenses too. So that's another reason why the DoD needs to act on it, is acting on it, is because it's a national security threat straight up. Quote, the effects of climate change are a national security issue with potential impacts to the Department of Defense, missions, operation plans, and installations. That was something that was written by the Pentagon in 2019. Over 2/3 of all of the mission critical military installations around the world are threatened by climate change. So that's a lot. Mom sent me a article on the Navy is on the front lines of adapting to climate change. Should I look at it now or later? I feel like I should look at it later, but that's really cool. Because boy, this is the shorter chapter. The next chapter is a long chapter, so I'm trying to get through this one. But this one, it has so much information. Like, get the book, guys. Get the book. Get the book. The other two people watching this right now. Unless one of them's Rahul, and he already got it. So, okay. So the impact of climate change will also be felt around the world. And so the DoD considers climate change a threat multiplier for the unstable regions of the world. And frankly, I would argue also the stable regions of the world, due to the havoc that changes in climate have on people's livelihoods and on natural resources. So then he asks the question that we're all thinking, how do elected officials and media pundits still claim to be uncertain about the realities of climate change when the Pentagon has been putting out report after report declaring it's one of the biggest threats to our national security for over the last 3 decades? And as someone that represents a media source, I really couldn't tell you. I don't know. That's a great question. So the next section that we're going to talk about is business taking action. So now we're on the business side of things, which is something that I think, us as individuals can relate to a little more than the DoD, unless you work for or in the DoD. So some businesses taking action, let's just list them off. Amazon, Apple, Bank of America, BMW, Citi, Coca-Cola, Facebook, GM, Google, Goldman Sachs, IKEA, Johnson & Johnson, Kellogg's, Lego, Lyft, Microsoft, Nestle, Morgan Stanley, Nike, Salesforce, Sony, Starbucks, Unilever, Visa, Walmart, Wells Fargo. Those are just some companies that are moving towards being carbon neutral, that have created some sort of personal guidelines to move towards carbon neutrality. Pretty cool. Over 160 major companies have made renewable energy pledge through an initiative called RE100, which I am definitely going to investigate. Maybe even for the next video. We'll think about it. Let me know in the discussion if you think that I should cover RE100 or the Solutions Project for the next video, because I think I'm going to do one of them where I'm literally just going to walk through the website with y'all and just see what we can see. Okay, so yes, so 160 countries, major companies have made a renewable energy pledge through RE100. In the US, the cost of electricity goes up each year between 3 and 7%. So that's a reason why it makes economic sense for these businesses to move towards renewable energy. And purchasing their own renewable energy systems or signing long-term fixed price contracts known as power purchase agreements with renewable energy power providers is just a more secure way that businesses can manage how much money energy costs are going to be from year to year. You want it to be consistent in order to plan for the following years. So if things go up 3 to 7% every year, that's hard to budget for. And it also just costs more money year after year. Yes. So, yeah. And in addition to that, what he says here is not only is the movement towards renewable energy about moving towards renewable energy, it's also about making your current method of using energy more efficient. And those tend to go hand in hand with each other, which is good that they do. Mom says 280 members of RE 100 now. Wow. Look at that. Another 20 companies. I wonder what companies those were and how many of them I actually covered in the 2020 recap. I think Ford is there, and Ford wasn't on this list, so I don't know if Ford was there before, but anyways. So yes, they're also finding that some companies such as Apple, Microsoft, and Google need so much power that renewable energy developers have to build massive new solar and wind farms big enough to meet their power needs, which is a lot. And that's something where I have a question, because then I've heard there's possibility for environmental degradation by possibly bulldozing areas to put solar panels up. So you have to make sure that they're doing it in an ethical way. They're not taking land from any indigenous people. They're not destroying habitats in order to create that renewable energy, so on and so forth. So that's still something to keep in mind. But it's still really cool that they're going through with these plans, So yeah, so basically we're just seeing a lot of different innovation to draw down emissions, and these companies are really not only just doing it for themselves, but by doing so, they're setting the bar for other companies to follow suit, which is good. It's basically like the company version of if your neighbor's doing it, then it's better, then you're more likely to do it, which is something we'll get to later. So now he's going to talk about sports teams that are moving towards 100% renewable energy, which is really cool. And I want to see that trend more. And that brings up another organization that I definitely do want to just investigate their website, which is the United Nations Sports for Climate Action Framework, which sounds super cool. I didn't know that was a thing. I was thinking when I started reading this section that it should be a thing, and then it was a thing, and I was like, yes. But he starts off by using the Yankees as an example because they have moved towards energy efficient LED lights and have a zero waste policy that keeps 85% of the stadium's trash out of landfills. That second part's really cool. The LED light bulbs, that's cool too, but that's really cool. In addition to that, they are also offsetting carbon emissions that they haven't been able to avoid producing yet, but they've moved also towards more renewable energy focuses. And one of the ways that they most effectively went through this process is that they hired an environmental science advisor to walk them through what needs to be done. And I think that if I had a job section for my website, that would go there. I feel like that's going to be a job industry that's going to continuously increase, is companies that literally go in and say, hey, are you being environmentally friendly in the best way? And if not, here's how you can do better. They're already in existence, but I think it's definitely going to increase. It's kind of like, just the people that check and make sure your alarms are okay, stuff like that, stuff like that just, it's just something that you just have to check up in every so often, and maybe that just needs to be a thing too. So, yes. So that's really cool for the Yankees. Good for you. And in addition to, just doing it for themselves, sports fans will see that, and it makes a difference. It kind of puts climate change into the conversation where there normally wouldn't really be much climate change conversation, aka sports, and that's really cool. That's one of the things we need to do, is we just need to permeate the climate impact of everything that we do in each of our conversations, not in a guilty way, just in, and it just needs to be something that is considered. All right, and now he's going to talk about Las Vegas, which is another case that I didn't know about that I find super interesting. So the MGM Grand, which is the owner of 13 casinos and resorts along the Las Vegas Strip, decided that they wanted to move towards energy independence rather than being subjected to increasing costs of their electricity company, Nevada Energy. And so they started moving towards solar energy. They started by putting a bunch of like solar panels on their rooftops and stuff, to the extent that it was 8.3 megawatts of a system. And yet that only still accounted for a quarter of their power supply needed. So in order to do that, then they decided that they wanted to build more renewable energy and stuff, and eventually get off the Nevada Energy program. But the Nevada Energy program was like, hey, if you're going to get off, then I'm going to charge you money, like millions of dollars, in order to get off my plan, because the utility companies, they're honestly afraid of things like solar, because solar, it's not really as much of a moneymaker. There's the initial money making, but it's not the same thing as how we're thinking of utilities now, where it's continuous payment. It's just a different business system in a way, you know? And so a lot of utility companies are kind of afraid of people moving towards solar in that way. And they even call it a utility death spiral. But eventually the MGM company decided to do it anyways, and so they paid the money to get out of the contract, and they moved towards investing in a solar developer called Invenergy. It's one of those mixed word ones that I can't pronounce. And so now the MGM casinos and such, they're able to have over 90% of their electricity be renewable. And so next time you go to Las Vegas, check out the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino, Circus Las Vegas, Bellagio, Mirage, Aria, and MGM Grand Resorts, because they are all powered on solar, which is so cool. I did not know that. So basically all the places that Ocean's 11 stole from, those are the ones you should go to. Nice. Okay. And the most telling aspect of the story, as he says here on page 117, is that it wasn't just because they wanted to help decrease their overall carbon footprint. It just made economic sense to do what they were doing. The fact that they that they still were able to, that they still felt that it was worthwhile to exit the contract with by giving up $86.9 million for an exit fee. They still found that it was a good business idea to do that and to invest in solar power for their long run decisions, which is, it just shows really how amazingly marketable it is. Hold on, I need to let my cat in. Hi. Look, baby. Oh, kitten. Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about Hawaii. So Hawaii, which honestly makes sense, had an electricity bill in 2018 that cost 2 to 3 times more than the rest of the U.S., and that's because they're on their own. They can't necessarily be a part of the centralized grid. And so they, Solar State, became the first country where the cost of solar became lower than the grid electricity, which is also known as grid parity. Grid parity. And their utilities company was not happy about it, because solar power is kind of seen a little bit as a threat. So let's see, where am I? Okay, so why did I highlight net metering? Okay, so net metering is a mechanism that allows you to get credits on your electric bill for every excess kilowatt hour that your solar system generates and sends back to the grid. Oh, I see, right. So so the utilities company in 2015 discontinued that program, which wasn't helpful for those that were trying to get solar, because then if there was a surplus of power generated by their solar, then they basically gave it to the grid for free. They no longer got money for their excess solar. And so as a result, um, the market eventually got to a point where it just made more economic sense for individuals to get their own batteries for their solar power systems instead of connecting up to the centralized grid. And that was an example of basically how it just became decentralized, because it just made more economic sense to do so. And that is an argument for conservative folk, Republicans, who don't like government intervention and want to do something about climate change, because it really is a really good way to get yourself not involved with big government. Like it's a way to get off the grid, right? So that's really cool. Or at least have your community just be on a grid, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. So yes, and also Hawaii has committed to going 100% renewable energy. And Puerto Rico has too, because what they did after Hurricane Maria hit them, and some areas were without power because it knocked off the central grid for like a year, which is ridiculous from a US standpoint of their like part of us, kind of, so we really should have treated them better. But anyways, so as a result of their grid basically getting wiped to zero, they decided to build up better. And how they've been doing that is they have been installing solar panels and creating a plan where basically they divvied up the island into 8 self-sufficient zones dubbed as mini grids. And those zones are each more powered by clean energy methods, specifically solar, so that if something happened again and things were to get knocked out, not only would not everything get knocked out in one swipe, but also with solar power, it would also come back online a lot faster, assuming not all solar panels were broken and stuff, obviously. So that's a great example of just building better. And also I want to read this section because it's interesting. I'm going to read it because it's interesting. So this is on page 120. So this was an example for how the new system of mini grids work instead. Television is unidirectional. The news program is created by the TV station and is broadcast for everybody to watch. The internet, on the other hand, is multidirectional. Platforms like YouTube allow anyone to create their own content and share it with others. The same shift is happening with electricity. The centralized monopoly utility model is unidirectional. The big power plant generates all the electricity and inefficiently transmits it all over long power lines to communities and people's homes. But the decentralized electricity model, made possible through distributed clean energy technology like solar, batteries, and electric vehicles, allow energy to flow in a multi-directional way. Homeowners could be both consumers and producers of energy, creating a surplus of clean energy every day that they share with their neighbors and that they are compensated for. Instead of just buying electricity from the utility, you would buy and sell electricity with your neighbors. Basically, if you become a homeowner, you are basically creating a source of income in a way. The house is semi-paying for itself, because if you have solar panels on it, then you could hypothetically sell it back to the utility companies or just to your community, your community's grid, and you would then get compensated for your house existing, basically, which is amazing. By the way, there's little Rue bug. Hi, Rue. Oh, we're just going to be right there. Okay, I will make sure not to block the view of the Rue. All right, let's keep going. So yes, now we're going to talk about, well, so the next part is called leapfrogging, which basically talks more about the decentralized sort of grid. And I'm basically just going to read the little parts that I have highlighted, because I have a lot in my brain and I can't quite remember what exactly this part said. As the cost of these technologies come down, and these 1 billion people who currently don't have electricity are able to experience the benefits of electricity that we have taken so often for granted, think about the incredible ways in which people's lives will change. Oh, that's right. So then we're talking about how people who were normally in like lower, more, what am I saying? Sorry. Okay. Right. So not everybody nowadays in the world has access to regular energy. And he's basically saying that by using renewable energy, it will become a lot easier for areas that are like way off and have trouble connecting to a centralized grid, or in communities that can't afford to be a part of the centralized grid for one reason or another, or different like countries that have trouble with their centralized grid. This is a way around that, which is really cool. Solar and wind, and some others potentially, but mostly solar and wind. So it just really shows that if done right, renewable energy could be a way that decreases the inequality for people. And, you know, we do take it for granted, but it could give people access to clean water, refrigeration for medicine, light to study by at night, and vast economic opportunities. So that's amazing. The main thing is we just have to get going. That's the main thing that we just have to do. And so now we're going to get going. And chapter 8 is communities at the forefront. And the quote in the beginning is by Miss Lovely Greta Thunberg. And she says, since our leaders are behaving like children, we will have to take the responsibility they should have taken a long time ago. Yeah, so here we go. Okay, so the first section for this, we are now on page 124, is called The Power of Community. So he starts off by reminding us that, unfortunately, sometimes the government takes a long time. And sometimes big businesses push government in the completely wrong direction, thanks to the $3.4 billion of businesses spend each year lobbying to have elected officials basically go in the wrong direction. So what can we do if both those systems aren't working great? We use community. We use signaling the market. But not just as individuals. I'm not just talking about the individual impact thing, because, again, as I've discussed in a previous video, that sometimes results mostly in people just feeling guilty, and they don't necessarily have full control of the economic decisions available to them. But communities have a bigger voice. And he gives an example that this is a tried and true method, from the Boston Tea Party to Gandhi's Salt March to Dr. King's Montgomery bus boycott to Cesar Chavez's Delano grape strike. So we have seen this time and time again where certain communities go and they boycott certain goods and services until the market changes. And I'm going to read this part too, which is from an article from Fast Company, which I don't know what that is, but yeah. Billions of green appliances are now sold every year. In 2018, the green construction will account for 3.3 million jobs in America. Hundreds of thousands of electric vehicles are now on America's roadways. Solar panel installations on American rooftops have now surpassed 1 million. Organic food sales are seeing double-digit growth each year, which we'll talk. We'll see. That's consumer choice by action, or that's consumer choice in action by supporting greener products and greener companies and denying our support to environmental and social abusers. We can radically shape the way our companies behave. Businesses buy what we demand. And that's true, you know? And, you know, it's both ways. But now we're talking about that way, you know? And one aspect of it that he kind of then goes into like the social psychology of it a little bit. So there's the mere exposure effect, which is if you're exposed to something more and more, you like it. And he gave the example of from the book Switch, which talked about like the Eiffel Tower. Originally, when the Eiffel Tower was built in Paris, Parisians hated it. They thought it was disgusting and terrible to look at. Now it's something that they admire and they consider it an important symbol of their city. So the more that people see things, they get used to it and they change. Just like there was, I don't know if it's still a thing. I'm sure some people still think it, but like I remember hearing more and more in like the early 2000s and stuff, how badly solar panels and wind farms looked. And so people didn't want them because they were considered an eyesore. And I really don't feel like I hear that as much now. I might be just tuning it out, but I feel like I don't remember hearing it as much. So that could be an example. And studies have shown that the same is true for energy efficiency measures. While intuitively we might believe that the biggest motivating factor in adopting energy efficiency practices would be financial savings, the actual driver is social pressure from peers. And this was regarding a previous part that says, a study by researchers at Yale and the University of Connecticut found that socioeconomic and demographic factors like income, party affiliation, and the unemployment rate had little influence on the spread of residential solar power systems. The main factor that seemed to drive whether a household installed such a system was whether a neighbor had recently done so. We're social critters. That's what we do. So we need to play with that idea and be good examples for each other. As each innovator creates something from nothing or breaks through the perceived barriers, our collective understanding of what's possible shifts. I don't need to say anything more than that. Yeah, so that's the first part of this chapter. And then he goes and talks about specific examples that he has seen because he is the founder of a company called Revolve. And Revolve, as I guess I'll just kind of skip to the description of Revolve just to give a little more context. But it is basically a company that is where's the section that just explains it more elegantly than I can? Sorry, one sec. It was going so well. Where is it? Well, okay, so yeah, so Revolve is basically a company that that supports nonprofits and community members in to get solar panels on their roofs. And how they do that is they use this program where it's like a pay it forward model. I believe. I don't want to get it mixed up. I feel like I'm going to get it mixed up. It made so much sense in my head earlier, and now I'm kind of confused. But one of the things that he did say that he got inspiration from was a company called Kiva. And Kiva basically has different people invest in opportunities in developing countries and communities. And then they are able to basically get their money back when the business succeeds. And usually they just end up reinvesting that money into other projects. And so that's a really cool example of being able to invest in good stuff and make them happen because you know that you're going to get your money back, because the economics have shown that you will get your money back. Okay. So yeah. Does anyone have anything they would like to add? Because my brain is starting to crumble a little bit. But I really did want to talk about this stuff, but my brain just completely turned off, which is why I usually have my mom here to help, because my brain's turned off. But yeah, so the federal government offers tax for going solar. That's a fun fact. So if you want to go solar and are able to, and like you pay taxes and stuff, then you can get a tax cut by putting solar panels on your house. But nonprofits don't pay taxes, and so that's where Revolve found a space in the market that they could just sneak right in on. And so they were able to use the Solar Seed Fund, which is a pay it forward model that grows over time, to basically have people help support it, and then they'll get their money back, or companies, or you put solar panels on, and so you have a bit of a loan, and then you pay it off over time as solar panels save you money. And basically what he shows in this chapter, and I do highly recommend reading it. I'm sorry I'm not giving the best description of it, because it's a really good chapter, especially if you're interested in entrepreneurship or the economics of solar panels and stuff. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a video having to do with solar power. And when I do, I'll talk more about these specific topics that were covered, because then I'll have a script in front of me and I'll be able to do this better. But what I'm going to leave you guys with, because I guess I'm going to kind of close it up, is there are a lot of opportunities with renewable energy because it does save you money in the long term. So by doing something that, by investing in it, it's a good investment. And I will also say that entrepreneurs have a lot of opportunities to really get in on this right now. So if you are an entrepreneur and you're looking to start a company, or you're looking to help a company that's already starting up, there's a lot of opportunities for you in this market, which is really cool. And there's also a program called Sustain Us, which pairs young entrepreneurs with mentors. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then that sounds really cool. The author of this book actually mentored someone through that program, and that person, who was this young guy, started a nonprofit called Solarity, but it's like spelled weird. And basically he started getting solar streetlights on parts of Detroit where the energy companies took out all the streetlights because they're like, we can't pay for it. And it became super dark. And then the crime rate went up even more. And so he started doing crowdfunding campaigns to put more streetlights up. And then he ended up creating more of a substantial way of doing it. And that's something that I'm basically seeing with a lot of these companies as they start up is they start with a good idea, right? They start with something. It doesn't have to be perfect, but they start with something that works for the small scale that they start with. And then as they grow, they learn new things that can help make the business better. And then that is able to continue the growth as it goes. So if you're looking to start something, you don't need to have a perfect plan to start it. You can just do what you think is best and what is environmentally and ethically good to do, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Like the economics have to be there to some extent. You won't want the business to fail, but you don't have to have a completely perfect plan because you will learn along the way and get better, which is just solid advice in life. Yeah, and also another part I liked is it says that they started with a different example for a solar company, as they started with something very small, but then by doing it on a nonprofits building, because nonprofits generally have some pretty good like community messaging, then it got shown on the local news station. And that, to me, I immediately got, we need to make sure that we have good local news and good local news coverage for community-based projects, because if we only focus on the national news, then there's never going to be any clout for community-based projects. So then that got me thinking, okay, well, now we need to do better with the local newspaper stuff. Yeah. My brain is all over the place today. I'm so sorry. Okay. And another fun factoid is, of course, Leonardo DiCaprio is an example of someone who is big on the environment and a celebrity. And another example is Mark Ruffalo, aka the Hulk. He's great in other ways too. And he actually was one of the first to really bring about the idea of going towards 100% renewable energy. He helped popularize that idea, which is really cool. Yeah. And I guess with that, I will go ahead. There is so much I want to talk about. Yeah, this is going to be a separate video. That's just what needs to happen. I'm just going to leave you with a quote, and then we will end for the night. And it is by environmental thinker Alan Turing. And he says, the future of life on Earth depends on whether the richest fifth of the world's people, having fully met their material needs, can turn to non-material sources of fulfillment. Whether those who have defined a tangible goal of the world development can now craft a new way of life, at once simpler and more satisfying. In other words, beyond the technical shifts we must pursue, this is now on Andrea talking. Andreas, sorry. In other words, beyond the technical shifts that we must pursue, what shifts in our minds, hearts, and culture will get us to the root of what's causing climate change? And that is where we're going to read on the next one. So we only have 2 chapters left. Fun fact, yay! We only have 2 chapters left. The chapter 9 is gratitude, simplicity, and service. And chapter 10 is rolling up our sleeves, which is a great way to end a book. And yeah, so make sure you read the last 2 chapters, and I am going to get in contact with the author to see if I can set up an interview with him. So that will be the next plan. On Monday, what do you think? I guess Mom, because you are the one that's talking to me here. Oh, and Rahul. Hi. Yay. Okay. So you two, my biggest fans. For Monday, should I talk about the Solutions Project or about Re 100? What are we thinking? Any votes? I'll wait a sec. Drink some water. Anyone? Yeah. Can you please repeat? Mom says Solutions Project. Yeah, so the two options are the Solutions Project or Re 100, which is the one that businesses have signed up for. Solutions Project. Okay. So on Monday, we're going to talk about the Solutions Project, which is basically a website that, I didn't even cover it in this conversation, but the Solutions Project, I had heard about it in college at some point, but it's a website that breaks down how every single state can be 100% renewable energy by 2050. And they do that by just looking at the natural resources available to each state. Like, is offshore wind better for a certain state, or is solar, or is onshore wind, or is hydro? So it looks at all the different renewable options and looks at each different state to determine what would be best for each state to invest in order to move towards carbon neutrality or move towards 100% renewable energy by 2050, which if we do move towards 100% renewable energy by 2050, it says somewhere, and I don't know if I'll find it in time. Can I turn to it right away, please? I could do this. Okay, well, maybe I can't do it, but it will make it, I don't need to do it. It will make it so we don't hit that 1.5 degrees Celsius warming, which is our target. If we move every state towards renewable energy, 100% by 2050. So that's what I'll talk about on Monday. Yay! Okay, and then look out for a video coming having to do with the solar economy, basically. I might just be reading from this book. Yes, no, I'll do my own research. We'll see. Okay, thank you so much for joining. I had a great time rambling as usual, and I will see you all on Monday. Happy MLK Day and happy presidential inauguration. Make sure you all stay safe. And stay safe because we're still in a pandemic too. And the last shot will be of the Rue. Take it away. Okay. Night. Mwah. Goodbye.